Welcome to Gambling with an Edge with your hosts Bob Dancer and Michael Shackleford. Bob Dancer is America's premier video poker writer and teacher. He's in the Video Poker Hall of Fame, and he has written 10 books, including Video Poker for the Intelligent Beginner and the best-selling $1 Million Video Poker. He helped develop the Video Poker for Winners computer software. Michael Shackleford is the force behind the websites Wizard of Odds, Wizard of Vegas, and Wizard of Macau. An actuary by profession, Michael has been analyzing the whole gamut of casino games since 1995. His Wizard of Odds website explains the best strategies for 140 different casino games. Michael is also the author of Gambling 102, The Best Strategies for All Casino Games, and is a former adjunct professor of gaming math at UNLV. The goal of the show is that, by listening, you will be a more knowledgeable gambler tomorrow than you were yesterday. And now, here are Bob and Mike.
Good evening. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Michael Shackleford is away tonight on personal business. Sitting in the co-host chair this week is Richard Munchkin. Welcome, Munch.
Happy to be here. Good to be here, Bob.
Good to have you back. Our guest tonight is Mark Billings, speaking about beating roulette by identifying and taking advantage of unbiased wheels. We'll be talking to Mark in a few minutes.
That's biased wheels, not unbiased wheels.
That's right. It's just that extra UN. All right, good.
Yeah, right.
It is interesting. All right, good. Now, Munchkin, you on your website, richardmunchkin.com, about 2 weeks ago, you posted an article giving advice to new Blackjack card counters. Let's spend some time reviewing that article. First of all, if you're a new counter, which count should you learn?
Yeah, well, excuse me. My advice to people when they come up and ask me this is always to learn the easiest count possible. But it really kind of depends on why you want to learn to count. So if you just are interested to play recreationally, then I would say learn either the KO or the Red 7, which are about as easy as you can get. They're certainly plenty powerful, and that would be good. If you're interested in maybe one day joining a team, then you're probably better off learning the high-low, which is the count that all the big teams have used in the past. But often new players get obsessed with the strongest count, what they think is the strongest count. And I think that's really, really a mistake.
Why?
Unless you're just doing it to feed your ego, you want to have what's considered the strongest count, then okay, fine. But it's not really going to win you any more money. And in fact, I would argue that it would probably win you less money because you're going to get tired quicker and you're going to make more mistakes. So if you're actually in it to make money, a person playing a simple count, if they can just play one more shoe per session because they didn't get tired, they're going to win far more than the person who spent the effort to use that harder count. Also, those counts really are better for playing single and double deck games. They really start to lose their extra performance when you're playing shoe games. So again, if you're out to make money, the most money to be made is not playing single and double deck games.
All right, so the exact count isn't one of the real critical things in becoming a player. What would be the 3 or 4 most important things in selecting which game to play?
Yeah, so the 3 most important things, well, the 4 most important things. The number 1 most important thing is, will the casino take your action? Now, that's going to depend on how much you bet. But at any level, even if you're a red chip player, there are casinos that are going to accept your action happily and not sweat it, and there are other casinos that are going to sweat you, even betting red chips. I know several players over the years who've been barred at the El Cortez without even playing a hand. Just the way they walked around the pit and looked at the games got them backed off. So, and years ago I saw Griffin flyers on people spreading 5-30, on double deck games. So that's the most important thing is, will the casino tolerate your level of action? But then if you're a card counter, the three most important things are penetration, game speed, and the amount of your bet spread. So when you look at the blackjack boards, often people are asking, I'm going to go to such and such place. What are the rules? Well, the rules are really irrelevant. It really doesn't matter what the rules are. What matters is, will they take your action? And then what's the penetration? Can you get tables that are heads up or very few players? And then how much are you going to spread your bet?
So, like Stanford Wang has current blackjack news, where it lists the rules of basically every blackjack game in the country. And what you're
to me, that really is only useful to let you know where the casinos exist. But when people ask me about that stuff, I always say you have to scout your own games. You can't go by what you see in that current blackjack news. First of all, in my own case, I might be looking for far different things than I'm certainly not looking for what the rules are. I may be interested to know whether they have single deck or double deck or six deck, but but to me, that newsletter is really not worthwhile.
But it does list penetration in the newsletter,
yes.
I believe. So that information is key. All right, now,
yes.
Good. So now we haven't officially introduced Mark Billings yet, and he's here mainly to talk about roulette tonight. But Mark is also a blackjack author. So, Mark, do you have any comment on Munchkin's advice to beginning card counters?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. First of all, how you doing, guys? Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Sure,
Happy.
and I guess I get to see you in about 3 weeks or so. One thing that comes to mind, I think that if you found a game that had early surrender, you might actually be very interested in knowing the rules. And a long time ago, I think it was 1987, I played a game in Korea that had something called a 5-card half win. It was a staggeringly good rule. So occasionally the rules will make a big difference, but for the most part, I think you're absolutely right. I think that, first of all, can they handle the action? And one thing that I found very interesting about your article, and this is something that a lot of people, for whatever reason, kind of miss, is the count. I do know that almost all professional players play a one-level count, a high-low count, and it's because they're in it for the money. But not everybody is in it just for the money. For people who want a challenge, and I've played with players who really like, a mental challenge, they'll play I know a guy who still counts a 17 count, if you can believe it. It's a Revere count, a very complex, multi-level count. When I first started playing, it was 1981, and I played there were single decks everywhere. I played almost exclusively in Reno and in Lake Tahoe, and I counted the 14 count, which is, again, it was a multi-level count, and it had a side count of aces, and it was just brutal. But as the single decks kind of went away and we found more and more shoes, I switched to a much simpler count. So if it's
I was in the same boat. When I started, I would use the high up 2 for single deck games and the high low on shoe games. And I agree with you. Some people are in it for the challenge. They want to keep side counts of 7s and things like that. But they shouldn't fool themselves that they're doing it because they're going to win more money that way. The guy who uses that 17 count and plays double deck, where, they watch those games like hawks and will take very little action and a very small spread on that double deck game, he would win far more money, if he just moved over to a 6-deck game with a bigger spread and would get tolerated better probably.
And would also play faster and more accurately. Absolutely.
Right.
So I couldn't agree more.
Good.
Yeah. But like I said, it isn't necessary. Not everybody has the same motivation. People.
Right.
If you're in it to have a challenge mentally. I mean, I will tell you that when I went to Korea to play that 5-card half win, that was the most complicated blackjack game that I've ever played, and we had an absolute blast. And the reason for that is, I'll just explain it very, very briefly. I'm sure some of your listeners are aware of this, but the way it worked was, if you got a hand that consisted of 5 cards, you could either play the hand and hope to win, but maybe would lose the hand, or you could immediately surrender the hand for an automatic half-unit win. So in other words, if you bet it was Wang, I guess, so if you had 100,000 Wang out there, you could immediately take a 50,000 Wang win. So this was an incredible rule, and what made the game so challenging is you basically had a different strategy for 2-card hands, for 3-card hands, and for 4-card hands. Because a 4-card 12 you would hit against anything in hopes to get that 5-card hand so that you could surrender it and get an automatic half win.
Yeah, that game also had early surrender versus tens, and we played that game actually quite a lot. In fact, I had an apartment in Seoul for 3.5 years.
It was so that's why the game is no longer there.
Yeah. Very good. Now, on this show, we regularly give beginning video poker advice, but not often beginning blackjack advice. This was a good change of pace, and thank you both. Now, let's officially introduce Mark Billings. Now that you've heard him for 5 minutes, let's tell you who he is. Mark has been a professional gambler since 1981. Until 1986, he played blackjack exclusively. In 1986, roulette was added to his repertoire. He's written extensively for Arnold Snyder's Blackjack Forum, the Blackjack Insider, and he's edited Lawrence Scott's How to Beat Roulette. He's the author of the Bias Wheel Handbook. It's currently out of print, but it'll be soon available electronically, and a blackjack book called The Ultimate Edge. Mark Billings, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Thank you very much.
In your book, Bias Wheel Handbook, it teaches techniques to identify and exploit roulette wheels that are biased. What percentage of wheels in casinos today would you estimate are biased to a degree that is exploitable?
It's a difficult question to answer. They're fairly rare, but they do exist. I would say the chances are something like maybe 1 in 20 or 1 in 30. And it was good that you added the caveat, to a degree that's exploitable, because almost every roulette wheel is going to be biased to some degree, because roulette wheels are simply they're mechanical devices, and over time they wear out, and they wear out unevenly. And so it would be very, very unlikely that a wheel would remain unbiased forever. But the thing about it is, as you kind of alluded to, it needs to be biased enough to overcome the house edge. So if a wheel is, let's say you find numbers that are biased to the tune of 2 or 3%, that isn't going to do you any good, because in roulette here in the States, where there's a 0 and double 0 on the wheel, the house edge is 5 1/4 against you. So getting a 3% bias isn't going to do you any good in terms of making money.
So how did you get interested in beating roulette? How did that come about?
Well, what happened was in 1980, it was late 82, we actually built these little tiny computers to, they're not tiny by today's standards, but for back then they were very small. We built some computers to play blackjack, specifically to do something called shuffle tracking, which we'll probably talk about another time. And the computer, they were running at 1 megahertz, not a gig, a megahertz, and we had a grand total of 30K of memory. And they were just absolutely amazing. So we traveled around a lot. We spent a lot of time in Europe. And while in Europe, I noticed, as everyone does, that the real game in Europe, the real money, is on roulette. And now in Europe, the roulette wheels only have 1 0 instead of 2. Makes a very, very big difference. And in addition, if you're betting on the outside, they only take what amounts to half your bet. If you bet on red and the 0 comes in, they actually put the bet in abeyance. It's called en passant in France, I guess. and then you basically either win or lose on the next one. So it drops the house edge down even further. So it was pretty clear that, there was a lot of action, and, I spent a lot of time hanging around, especially because in a lot of the casinos in Europe, the blackjack tables don't open until pretty late, and so there was really nothing else to do. And we kind of watched all the action, and I was just kind of watching the wheels and just wondering if there was any way that anything could be done. Then in 1985, a book was published called The Eudaimonic Pie. In England, the title was better. It was called The Newtonian Casino. It was about a group of physicists who had attempted and ultimately kind of failed at beating the game. And according to the book, anyway, the reason that they didn't really succeed was because they were having hardware problems. Their hardware really wasn't built, I guess, robustly. So
I would just say to anybody listening, I would highly recommend this book, The Eudaimonic Pie. It's really a very interesting gambling book.
Yeah, really great, really great. So what happened was one of the guys in the team thought, well, we have hardware, and the program runs in RAM, and it's a computer. So, right now it's running a shuffle tracking program, but it could run any program, So he made a few phone calls, and he actually tracked down one of the main characters in that book named Doan Farmer, who had really spearheaded the effort. Brilliant, brilliant guy. One of the guys responsible for developing chaos theory from the ground up. Really, really smart guy. So we started working with Doan and a couple of other people, and the program was kind of written and rewritten, and that's kind of how it got started.
And now in the book, they were not successful with the roulette computer. Were you successful with the roulette computer then?
I would have to say yes. Yes.
Any kind of numbers you'd care to give us?
Well, I can tell you that it actually got embarrassing. That there were times I can remember one. We had one 4.5-hour play where we had a 185% edge wired to wire on everything we put out. There was a play where we actually split up into two people, one guy actually running the computer and the other guy putting the bets out, because it really wouldn't have looked so good to have one guy kind of staring at the wheel and then lunging out and putting the bets out, So we had a kind of a BP spotter thing going on, right, for the audience. That in blackjack, a lot of times you split up the work between somebody who counts the cards and another player who can kind of fool around and talk to the waitresses and drink, and he's the one who bets the big money, and the small player or the spotter will signal that player. Well, that's kind of what we were doing here. So I would run the computer, and the other gentleman would put the money out. During this one particular play, the dealer was actually getting we were betting the limit, so it was straight up bet. So she was actually getting his payout ready before she spun the ball. It was ridiculous. Yeah.
And was most of your money won in Europe, or were you able to take off a lot in the U.S.?
No, we did it here too. By the time we were rolling, the law had already passed. In 1985, in July, they passed a law in Nevada that prohibited the use of computers. So we didn't play at all in Nevada, but in other places in North America and mostly in Europe. England in particular, there's a lot of casinos in England. You'd be surprised. I think there were 126 casinos in England. I'm talking about the early 90s now, is when we really got rolling with this.
I'm surprised they didn't write a follow-up book.
Well, if
how do you follow up on a word like eudaimonic?
Yeah, that's a good point. No, I think if a follow-up book is written, I'll probably write it.
Well, you should. I'd certainly be interested in reading it.
Yeah, it was quite and technically it was also it's a very interesting problem. It's you have this rotor that's turning in one direction and it's slowing down but slowly, and then you have this ball up spinning around really fast and slowing down fast, And so how do you predict where that ball will intersect with the spinning rotor, how long in the future and all that kind of stuff. It was really, it's a terrific problem. And as you know, Rich, you've read the book, The Eudaimonic Pie, you know kind of what they went through to get this thing to work. It's not a simple problem, but we really had a terrific run with that.
Now,
I was just going to say, we all, the three of us, have a mutual friend who I love to quote because Bill has said for years, sooner or later, everyone has a roulette project. And in my experience, almost everyone I've met in gambling at one time or another has tried to get involved in roulette, myself included.
Yeah, well, there is a good reason. I mean, it's in terms of cover, you couldn't ask for anything more because nobody thinks that roulette players know anything about anything. That's the automatic default position. If you go up to a roulette table, well, you can't be too smart because you're playing a game that has about 10 times the house edge that Blackjack does.
Now, your book, The Bias Wheel Handbook, has nothing to do with what we've been talking about so far.
No, it doesn't.
Okay,
That's exactly right.
Now, your book deals with identifying wheels that have some numbers come up more frequently than others, some numbers come up less frequently than others. So, and you track this. And so generally speaking, how does this technique work?
Well, it is interesting that you bring that up. The only reason we started with the bias stuff was because we were doing the other thing, and we just happened to be writing down the numbers to look like we were doing something. And for years, we just threw them out, at the end of the night. And maybe we'll get into this later, but it was an incident in Belgium that convinced us that we maybe should be keeping these numbers and taking a closer look at them. But at any rate, basically the idea is that wheels basically fall apart. Everything falls apart. Your car will fall apart. Houses fall apart. Everything ultimately falls apart. It's the second law of thermodynamics. And when it comes to roulette wheels, they kind of fall apart, unevenly. And so the idea is to track the numbers until you have a statistically significant bias. In other words, numbers that are coming in more than they should, that's over and above the normal random chatter that you're going to get when you have large groups of numbers. To say that another way, let me see if I can explain this better. Let's say, you're here in America, so there's 38 numbers on the wheel, right? There's 1 through 36, there's 0, and there's 00. So there's a total of 38 numbers. After 3,800 spins, each number will have come in an average of 100 times. Real simple, right? But as you probably know, there's almost no chance that after 3,800 spins, every number will have come in exactly 100 times. It doesn't work that way. The world just isn't that smooth. There's a certain amount of choppiness in the data, and there's an actual statistical test for that. On the other hand, after 3,800 spins, you're certainly not going to have found that 19 numbers came in 200 times each, and the other 19 numbers came in 0 times each, because the world isn't that choppy.
I could make money on that wheel.
Yeah, you sure could. Well, I'm glad you said that, because even though you're not going to find that skew, that's exactly what we're looking for. What we're looking for is a situation where the choppiness is more than you can expect for a system with 38 possible outcomes. And that's exactly what we look for. And it's not that easy, because the very thing that causes a bias, right, the where, can actually serve over the next, 30,000 spins to make that bias go away. I mean, theoretically, it's certainly possible. But what we have found in actuality is whatever is causing it initially tends to continue. In other words, you really don't see wheels kind of getting biased and then getting unbiased. It doesn't really work that way. In reality.
Okay, so the big question, that people always ask, how many spins do you need to watch before you can determine whether there's a bias or not?
And the answer, of course, is it depends, right? It depends on lots of things. Now, what it really depends on is, well, there's a couple of things. The first thing is, how confident do you need to be? There's a kind of a psychological component there, right? How comfortable do you need to be before you're willing to put out your money? Do you want to be 80% certain? Do you want to be 90% certain? Do you want to be 99% certain? And the second thing is really the size of the bias. Okay, so what that basically means is, let's say you happen upon a wheel and it turns out that there's an underlying, there's a couple of numbers that are biased to the tune of 15%. which, by the way, is very, very unlikely, right? Because if that's so high that the casino will probably even notice that, right? So the wheel will either be repaired or removed. But nonetheless, a bias of that size will manifest itself much more quickly than a smaller one, like, say, between 5 and 10%, which is really kind of our wheelhouse. I mean, anything less than about 5% is virtually, it's almost impossible to detect outside the noise. In other words, it doesn't even rise to the level of something that we can even say with any degree of certainty that's really a bias. In other words, it could just be the random natural fluctuations in the game. So somewhere between 5 and 10%. And in order to have any degree of certainty, I would say the minimum number of spins would be about 7,600, which would be an average of 200 occurrences per number. So it's a lot of data. I mean, the short answer is lots and lots of data.
So
right, but now let's say that you have decided that given a specific wheel and you think it has a bias on a specific number. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to go in and make a new test on a specific number. That's really kind of a different problem, right?
Absolutely.
Because we're testing. So now, once we have a number that we hypothesize is biased, now how many spins do we need to watch to confirm our hypothesis?
That's a terrific question. That's a very, very good question. If you have a hypothesis, you have a reason to think that a bias exists. In other words, let's just assume you see something and you say, I think there's something going on. And if you remind me, I'll give you an example of something that we saw in 1991, I think it was. You only need between, say, 1/3 and 1/5 the number of spins. Again, it depends on the size of the bias and the degree to which you want to be certain about it. Then you would need, if you simply go and start taking numbers and just kind of imagine you never even look at the wheel, if you know what I mean, right? It's like you just say, well, I'm just going to gather all this data, and from this data I'm going to do an analysis and figure out which numbers are biased. So, yeah, far, far less. If you actually have a hypothesis, if you think you noticed a physical reason where you say, I think number 2 is going to be coming in on this for whatever reason, whatever that reason may be, right? The little separator, we call them the frets, between the number 2 and 0 is higher on this wheel, so your hypothesis is, okay, the higher fret is going to stop the wheel or the ball as it's binging along, and if it hits that fret, it's going to be more likely to go back and settle in 2. It won't be able to get past it, whatever it may be. So, yes, if you see something that you think will explain a bias or cause a bias, I should say, then you really need far, far less data than if all you do is go up to a wheel and start taking numbers.
So when you have this data, you still need a computer program to work it out. And now in your original book, you included a DOS computer program, which was a good method if you happen to be programming 25 years ago.
Yeah.
Most players today are not competent DOS programmers. Now, when you release this book again, and are you going to have this program easy to use for modern PCs and Macs?
The answer is probably. I actually have a version that's a kind of it's actually a Windows version, which wouldn't really be appropriate, I don't think, but I may be able to write something and just put it on the web, right? In other words, just make a little web form and have a bunch of boxes into which people can type numbers and push the button. What the program really, or the programs that came with the book really did, and this was kind of the point, it didn't do a whole lot to tell you how your data was. It did a little bit, okay? What it really did was it said, okay, you've collected your data, you've put it in the spreadsheet, and you've found, 5 numbers with a standard deviation over 3 standard deviations out, okay? That's what you have in your actual data. Now you say...
So 3 standard deviations means there's basically a 1% chance that that's happening by luck.
Yes, that's exactly right. Right, and there are other things to kind of look at, like, well, if each of these numbers happens to be next to each other, that's what we refer to as a sector bias. Then it's even more likely that it's real. But let's forget that just for a second. So what you would do is you would say, okay, I've got these 5 things, these 5 numbers, each of which is 3 standard deviations out. How often would that happen randomly? And that's what the programs were really meant to do. You would then run, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sets of, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, in this particular case, that you have 7,600 spins, right? So then what you would do is you could run 100 or 1,000 or whatever sets of 7,600 spins and have the thing tell you how many times did this thing happen. And if it only happens 1 in 8,000, well, then you know that you have a very, very good chance of having a real bias. But if it happens like 1 in 5, right, then you don't. Then it's probably a fluctuation. So that was really – I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, in your experience, when you have found these bias wheels, would you find 5 numbers on a given wheel, or was it 1 number on a wheel? What was the more common thing to find?
It was definitely more common to find more than 1 number. It was very, very rare to find just a 1 number.
Grouped together, or would they be spread out?
Well,
on
both.
The wheel head.
Both, but I can tell. Yeah, and I think what Rich is referring to is the fact that most listeners probably know this, but the numbers on a roulette wheel are not in numerical order. They're kind of all over the place. So, for example, if the numbers 0, 28, 9, and 26 were your lead numbers, they sound like they're kind of all over the joint, but in fact, those are 4 numbers right next to each other on a wheel, right? We actually like the sectors, the contiguous numbers better because it's more likely to be real. And the reason for that is if you have let's say you have let's bring it down a bit to more realistic numbers. Let's say there's 5 numbers, and each of the 5 numbers is 2 standard deviations out. That's a pretty common occurrence if the numbers are all over the place. It's not very common for those 5 numbers to be contiguous. And so that was another thing. That was one of the other programs that we had, was a sector bias program, which would not only run, simulations, groups of 7,600 or whatever number you wanted spins. But in addition, you could say, and by the way, Mr. Program, we only want you to count those where those 5 numbers that were out by 2 standard deviations happen to be sitting next to each other on the wheel. So that's really what the tools were for. The tools really didn't do a whole lot of analysis for data that you collected. That's what the spreadsheets were for. I actually built some spreadsheets that would figure out, standard deviations and chi-squares and all this funny kind of stuff, correlations, things like that. What the program really was to say, okay, we're going to run a whole bunch of random sets. Let's see how often what we found happens randomly. And it's kind of amazing. I mean, you'd be very surprised at how just a random number generator can really mess with you a little bit. You can get a lot of bias out of a random number generator.
So we're trying to help you sell your book, and you keep telling us what your program won't do. So I'm not sure we're on the same page here, but moving on. Now, if you're always betting the same 5 or 6 numbers, roll after roll after roll after roll, and you continue to win, won't the casino eventually kick you out?
Well, first of all, like I said, you have an enormous advantage, I think, just playing roulette. I'm sure Rich can tell you this. If you sit down at a blackjack table and you bet even a little bit, I would imagine quarters, right? Because everybody knows blackjack can be beaten, you're immediately under suspicion, right? They see you, and right away, you might be up to something. It's exactly the opposite at a roulette wheel. It's very, very cool. The other thing is that with let's say the normal bias edge that we have, it sounds like a lot. I mean, I know 5 to 10% sounds staggering, right? Especially if you're a blackjack player and you would give your left arm for a 1% edge. You take really big swings. So you're not going to win all the time. It sounds like you would, right? With a monster edge like that. I mean, let's face it, that's the bigger edge than you're going to get if you're front loading and getting the whole card every single time. But it has to do with the fact that it's a multiple payout game. So you do take some swings. You're going to take some swings. So go ahead.
I was going to say that the casino is used to that. It's because of the variance of the game. The casino is used to, almost everybody loses, but the people who win a lot.
Yes.
It's a high variance game. So the casinos are used to when people win, they win a lot. So actually, no, it really doesn't bring heat to you. For betting the same. And a lot of people like to bet their same lucky numbers all the time, so that's not an issue.
It's absolutely the case. In fact, what tends to happen is because most people believe in the gambler's fallacy, which in short is the longer something hasn't happened, the more likely it is to happen. Then if people have their favorite numbers and they haven't come in a while, the last thing they're going to do is, take their money off that number because they think it's due. They think it's got to be coming up here soon, So, yeah, it's very common to see people playing, pretty much the same number. So, no, we haven't had that experience at all. We haven't had the experience that there's been any heat whatsoever. Yeah, it was surprising, too. It took me quite a while to get used to that because, after all the years of playing blackjack, of course, my initial response when I step up to the table is, okay, who's around, who's watching, who do I need to look out for? But I'm over that. It's incredible. Playing roulette really is its own cover.
Now, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
Blackjack players frequently use camouflage plays, and even video poker players sometimes play slots in order to keep our welcome in the casino. So it sounds like you're saying roulette players don't need any camouflage at all. They can go for the juggler every time and last forever. Is that sort of what you're saying?
I would say for your normal bias play, that's pretty much true. Now, that wasn't true with the other thing, right? With the thing that I was talking about that came out of the eudaimonic pie, the discussion we had earlier. That was different. That did require quite a bit of cover because the edge was so big, and it really did start to look a little bit ridiculous after a while. But for the bias play, you can certainly do a little bit. One of the things that we would do is bet much, much more on our core numbers. And then the other thing about this is, and this, I'm not sure how deeply I should get involved in this, but it turns out that when you play bias roulette, what you tend to have are the numbers that you have an edge on. And then there's what we call secondary numbers, which may be about even with the house. Maybe you think they're a little bit biased, whatever, but they're not nearly as good as the core numbers. What you could do is bet maybe, $25 or $50 a number on the core numbers and bet nickels on those secondaries. And so it looks like you're betting, you end up betting a lot more numbers, only your really heavy action is going to be on on the really good numbers. So we do that. But I wouldn't say that was done strictly speaking for cover, although it does serve as cover. We really weren't doing it for cover. In the book, I called it the Klotz criterion. There were a couple of things going on there where what the Klotz criterion helped us with was it kind of put up a bar or a hurdle above which the numbers had to climb before we could say that this is not noise, these are real biased numbers. And then there were these other numbers, and what you could do is bet these secondary numbers, and it actually smoothed out your fluctuations. So, again, it wasn't really done for cover, but it certainly served as cover.
I think we should mention there are a couple of traps that are very easy for people to fall into that want to try to get into this. And one of them is a very easy mistake to make is, we hired a young guy to go around to every casino downtown. He would make a milk run every day and write down all the numbers, on every wheel going up and down Fremont Street, And one of the traps that's very easy to fall into is those tote boards are not always accurate. You cannot guarantee that what it says on the tote board are the numbers that actually hit. That's why I asked the question about once you've identified a number you think may be biased, you want to go back and retest it. Another one is if you're looking at 10 different wheels, that's 380 numbers. So, of course, you're going to have one that's 3 standard deviations out, right? That's sort of the definition of 3 standard deviations, right?
Yes.
So that's another one. And then another big one is, especially in Las Vegas, The casinos will screw with you. If they have any inkling that they think you're betting a bias wheel, when you come back the next day, that wheel will have been changed, and you may not know it. So you should have some identifying mark on the wheel that you think has the bias, so that if suddenly it was switched in the middle of the night, you don't go betting on some wheel that's a completely different wheel than you were playing the day before.
So you spray paint the wheel before you leave.
Yeah, you put a big orange tag on the outside.
Good idea.
Now, not to put too fine a point on it, we know those wheels better than the backs of our hands. Those, it sounds strange because if you just kind of look at them, they all kind of look the same. But believe me, they all have very unique identifying marks. And yes, you're absolutely right about that. That has to be done. Now, as far as the electronic tote boards are concerned, I'll tell you a little story in a bit if we have time about something that happened to us.
We have about 5 minutes, so
okay.
We can utilize it any way you like.
Okay, well, let me just tell you, if the tote board makes an occasional mistake, basically there's a little electronic eye that can see the ball in the pocket, okay? And they do go off the rails occasionally. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's not. But the good news is a lot of times when they go bad, it's really, really obvious. You'll see like 9 17s on the reader board, and you probably, I hope the dude that you hired is smart enough not to write those down. But anyway, if it occasionally, like every 50 spins, puts a random number up there, it's not going to really matter that much as long as it's random. If it's systematic, that's a problem, and that's what happened to us in Belgium. What happened was we were over there. We were kind of fooling around. We were playing a little blackjack and, hanging around. So we started writing numbers down. And we had this little sector bias developing around number 22, with 22 being really a tremendous number. And so after about 3 days, which wasn't really enough data, but we figured, we know what we're doing. We had a little bit of muscles over there. We did a little bit of statistical analysis, and we decided to play. So we kind of played that section with twice as much money on 22 as on the other 4 numbers that were near it. And over the course of the 185 spins that evening, 22 came in exactly 0 times. So
that sounds expensive.
It happens, So the next day we went back, and we were kind of just, moping around a little bit. And we watched a number 12 on the reader board, and the 12, as you know, with the roulette board, what happens is a new number comes on and it pushes all the other numbers. In this case, it pushed them up. Most of the things nowadays, the new number comes on the top, but be that as it may, this is a long time ago. This was 91. The 12 moved up, and then the third time it moved up, it turned into a 22. And so that's a really bad thing to happen. If it's systematic, it's really bad. If it's random, it's really not so bad.
Well, however bad it is to have your 12 turn into 22 in roulette, it's worse in blackjack. Yes, as it turns out. You don't really want that. No, actually, blackjack is far worse than blackjack. You're right.
So, just out of curiosity, if we're talking about 7,800 spins, if you have a full roulette wheel, you might only be getting 30 spins an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So, where do you hang out for that many hours and hours?
You tend to do a route. You don't just stand around doing one wheel. There's. You go to one place, you go to another place, you go to another place, and by the time you work your way back to the first place, presumably about 15 or 20 spins have gone by, and then you just have a new board to take the data. And the thing about this is, and this is kind of important, I think you really have to like doing this. Either that or you hire people to do it, because if you don't like it, it's the data collection is murder. It's just murder. Yeah, you probably have a little experience. I can kind of tell. It's tough. It's really, really boring, and it's really, really tough. And it's good to hire people. We even had some software that would go through and tell us if people were just making up numbers. It turns out, or maybe I shouldn't say this, but it turns out when people just kind of sit at the bar and make up numbers instead of getting them off the reader board, they tend not to put in enough pairs, repeats.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? So we had a little program that could go through and take a look at the data to see if it was if it looked legitimate. We couldn't tell 100% certainty, of course, but you can get pretty close anyway.
Mark, thank you. This is fascinating. We're going to have you back in a few months talking about your blackjack book, but now we know a lot more about roulette and beating it than we did before.
Hey, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Hey, take care, guys.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thanks.
So, Richard, what did we learn tonight?
Well, that 7,800 spins is a number that I've been looking for a long time. That question has come up. I can't tell you how many times. And I have to say, I hope I'm back with you when he comes back to talk about his blackjack career, because his blackjack career and mine, at least in the early days, were so similar that.
We can make it a point to have you back, whether Shaq is here or not. So we can have 3 hosts that night. That would be fine with all of us.
Yeah. I read his book, The Ultimate Edge, going, I know these guys, because the blackjack world was much smaller back in, 1980 or 81 or whatever.
Very good. Now, I, of course, had never heard the word eudaimonic before this thing. It's EUDA. I don't have it in front of me, but it's
MONIC, I believe.
It's a marvelous word. So I'm not really sure what it means, but I will read that book.
Oh yeah.
Good. Let's talk about our sponsors. The South Point has more than 10,000 video poker games, returning more than 99%. That's more than anybody else. In January, earning 3,500 video poker points during the month entitles you to a free logo jacket. I have picked mine up, and it is. It's a pretty heavy-duty jacket. It has lining. It's not suitable if you live in the winter in Michigan, but it is quite a bit warmer. The Coast casinos are also giving out jackets this month, and the South Point jacket is considerably more durable and than the ones from the Coast casinos. On Monday, January 21st, there'll be double points celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday. The next semester of free video poker classes will begin at South Point on Tuesday, February 5th at noon in the showroom. The exact schedule will be posted tomorrow on bobdancer.com. The new class this semester will be 9-6 double bonus 10 play Ultimate X. That's a mouthful. But this game returns more than 99.8%. Can be played up to $25 per pop. It's the highest paying game at the South Point. It's eligible for all the double points. And at the Palms, they also have the game at $50 a pop, and it's the highest paying game that has access to all the promotions. They do have 100% games at the Palms, which aren't eligible for the promotions. Speaking of the Palms, the Friday and Saturday night drawings in January is called the $100,000 Avalanche of Cash. The time for the drawing in January is now 8 p.m. every Friday and Saturday, rather than the more typical 7 p.m. time, which has been when the Palms has had their drawing for several years. So they're changing it, and it's an experiment. Now, there will be 15 cash winners each night, and the top 5 winning entries, in addition to the cash, get 1 entry apiece into the January 26th drawing for a 2013 Chevrolet Avalanche, which in round numbers is worth $39,500. Or if 80% of that if you want cash, and that's $31,500. Sundays and Tuesdays remain double drawing entry days, with 40 ticket holders for the final drawing, assuming everybody shows up. Each ticket is worth about $1,000 if you take the car, or $800 if you take the cash. That's a significant. You have a 1 in 40 chance, but it's a 1 in 40 chance at a pretty good price. The PEW Play, Earn, and Win gifts on Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the first half of January have a theme of bling in the new year. There's some watches and jewelry, and the 2 top awards are Visa gift cards in $100 and $50 denominations, and they're earnable from video poker at 0.2%. And slots, they 2%. and you keep your points. So this is in addition. So it's basically close to double points because their normal points are 0.25% in free play. And so the Visa cards are worth 0.2. On videopoker.com, we regularly talk about the free monthly contest, which typically occurs over the last 8 days of the month. In addition to the monthly contest, they also have a daily contest where the winner earns $50 and a 1-month free gold membership to the site. Now, every day is a different game, so if any of you are snowed in and can't get to a casino, this is a way to play video poker for free, and maybe you'll win. Every day is a different game. For example, today is 100 play. Tomorrow is quick quad. Saturday is 4 of a kind bonus poker. So several of these games you may not have experienced in the casino. The site allows you to play them before you can, until you can get good at them, and then you go play with real money. Our guest next week is current Blackjack Hall of Famer Stanford Wang. Wang will be talking about how his monthly publication, Current Blackjack News, has changed over the years, and also his experience in investing in the Las Vegas condominium market, why he picked Vegas to invest in, and what his results are. I suspect part of his results were over the housing bubble burst in 2007, and so his results are not all positive, but we all have been through that. In 2 weeks, our guest will be tax expert Anne Freed-Lefton, talking about how the newly passed compromise between the White House and Congress averting the fiscal cliff, how it changes things for gamblers, tax-wise. So, Munchkin, it's been a couple months since you've been on our show, which is way too long. Anything happening in your world that you'd care to share with our listeners?
Well, I just bought a house in Vegas, so that's that's kind of a big deal. I don't plan on moving to that house for a couple of years, but we've been looking on and off for 6-8 months actually, and was happy to finally find the right place. So, very excited about that.
So I heard you were in town last week and looking near a location near where one of the people who works with the guy named Bill that you mentioned. Is that where you got it? I don't really want to mention it more closely than that, but
I think Tommy Highlands lives in that neighborhood too. But it was kind of a whirlwind Christmas time. I got an email from my real estate agent with pictures of the house. Yeah. I said, this looks really good. We were planning to go to Arizona. I said to my wife, let's stop in Vegas and look at the house. So we basically drove in, on Wednesday, the Wednesday before Christmas, looked at the house, liked it, made an offer, and left the next day to head down to Arizona, to see family for the holidays. And the offer, we went back and forth a little bit, but the offer was accepted. So,
good.
So that's... Yeah.
So now you have a house that's going to be vacant for 2 years.
Well, no, I'm gonna get a tenant in there. So.
Very good. Well, I hope you move to town. I would like you to be a regular co-host, and one of the main reasons you're not is how far away you listen. So you add something to the show that neither Shaq nor I can do, and I think our listeners appreciate it when you're on. So that would be good.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
All right. So we have 10 seconds left, so I want everybody to go out and hit lots of royal flushes, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
You've been listening to Gambling with an Edge with your hosts Bob Dancer and Michael Shackleford. Archived versions of past shows may be found on bobdancer.com and wizardofodds.com. We welcome emails at gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com. Bob Dancer and Michael Shackleford are both on Facebook and welcome your input or questions. Our sponsors are the South Point Hotel, Casino and Spa, the Palms Casino Resort, the website videopoker.com, and the website wizardofodds.com. Join us again next week for another Gambling with an Edge.